freight forwarder is really a good combination of getting relationships with customers who's helping them get products from A to B, using all resources possible to get the freight to any point as quickly as possible, as most economical as possible. So whether it's a truck, ocean freight, air freight, rail, and anything in between. If you're considering a logistics provider as an asset-based carrier, right? So those are the people that actually own the trucks, they own the trains, they own the vessels, they own the airplanes. The freight forwarder typically does not own those assets. They may own a truck or two, really small pieces of the supply chain to be able to support it. But in that world, an LSP is somebody who's pure asset-based. So their number one goal is just to fill the use of their assets. Now, I will tell you from my perspective, in the last 30 years, I would also consider a freight forwarder a logistics provider. So our job is to provide logistics services to customers, right? And that's whether you're asset-based or not. So there's not really a differential in that scenario. But some people consider an LSP somebody who actually has the assets. In the non-asset-based world, there really isn't a difference in my mind. An LSP and a freight forwarder, we're ultimately providing logistics services. So there's no difference in the way that I look at it. If people who are considering an LSP an asset-based provider, that's where there's a difference, right? So they're thinking of the people who actually have the equipment to move the product. Maersk or MSC, somebody who owns the actual vessels and the steamship lines that they bring the product over, they would be, in that definition, an LSP or an asset-based provider. We would buy space on those containers. And then as a freight forwarder, we're using their actual equipment to move the product from China to Dallas.
Whether it's supplier to manufacturer, manufacturer to DC, DC to end user, we use a variety of different partner options to do that. An asset-based provider typically uses their equipment to utilize that transaction through the entire process. So my truck is going to pick it up in LA, and my truck is going to deliver it in Baltimore from point A to point B. There's some advantages of that in certain environments, and then the disadvantages are also the inability to flex, and when they run out of equipment, or particularly in a lack of capacity intense environment, the flexible nature of a forwarder really plays well.
We would have the flexibility to leverage people that are good based on location, based on product, based on mode, right, of how they would do that. From an asset-based provider, they would tell you that the benefit is that we own the product, or we own the vessel, we own the truck. The problem is you lose all kinds of flexibility because their number one goal is to fill that vessel or fill that truck or fill that plane, instead of looking at how to better solution what the customer's needs are. So a lot of times they will sell into their needs. Or on the freight forwarding side, we typically will talk to a customer and say, what are your needs? And we're going to build a solution specific around how to solve their problems.
Broker domestically is typically handling just the transportation component within, say, the United States. A freight forwarder does global transportation as well as warehousing, pick and pack, and a variety of other functionalities. So we're just a little more robust. And if you ask me my personal opinion, brokers typically play in more of a commodity space. The forwarders have a little more flexibility to do a lot more creative type solutions that can lead to different pricing models versus just you're going to pay X from going to point A, from point A to point B.
And there's very few, what I would call really national providers who can provide all lanes, right? Kind of a thing. So when you're a broker, you have the flexibility to provide to any origin destination point that is needed from a customer perspective. If we're packing, if we're warehousing, doing anything extra, a broker typically is not going to support that need.
What used to be a commodity of just moving cargo from point A to point B dirt cheap has now become a necessity in order to keep your supply chains flowing. And what that has entailed is people saying, I need flexible options and I need any possible option to move my product from origin manufacturer to my distribution center so I can ship it to the end user. And if you don't have product, you can't exist. And so the old commodity way of finding the cheapest boat out there just isn't an option anymore. Finding alternative ways to get it there through a variety of different mechanisms are kind of what freight forwarders do. And that's what kind of makes us, that's what has allowed us to excel in the market.
We can be a lot more creative because we can use several different modes and or companies to move product from A to B, where that company that has their own trucks or their own vessels to move cargo, they're only wanting to fill their product. Again, I'll give you an example: China to Dallas. If you've got a vessel here that has a route of moving freight from China, say, to Long Beach, they know how many containers they have or need to fill on that ship in order to make that profitable. So they're going to sell into that to make sure that they have that. We don't have to do that because we may not use that vessel. We can use one of 10 different vessels who have different needs depending upon what their capacity is on their respective ship. So then we would have the ability to maneuver from a pricing perspective. How do we get more creative on talking to 10 different providers instead of one? So they're always going to be selling into their fixed asset, where we're going to be able to say, we want to understand what your needs are, and then we can pick and choose 10 different options potentially to provide the right service at the right price.
You'll see some stuff on our website that says one size fits none. I think that's a big one. What used to work doesn't necessarily work, and what used to be easy is no longer easy. Disruption has been all over the place for a variety of reasons: COVID, labor shortages, whatever. So to have a deep bench and to really have a variety of options and really deeply understand each and every client's need is critical in order to execute and perform on service.
If you have the need for a truck service between Houston and Dallas to move 5 days a week at 8 o'clock in the morning, it needs to be Dallas by noon. That's easy. It would be commoditized. They'd give you a rate and you'd be done. You probably wouldn't need much customer service because it's oversimplified. But when you get into the complex stuff, especially with what's gone on in our industry over the last couple of years, we look at COVID, we look at the number of steamship lines that were off the coast of California, right? You had different vessels that weren't getting back into rotation. So how do you deal with that? If I was using ABC Steamship Line only, and 10 of my vessels were sitting off the coast of Los Angeles for 50 days, they weren't getting back in rotation. So if I had freight going out of China and I couldn't get back in that rotation, my freight is sitting there because that's my only one option. Where we would then, as a freight forwarder, step in and say, hey, there's 10 other options. Let's look at getting you the solutions around that. So I think that oversimplified supply chains really make it where it's easy to be commoditized. But if you have any complexity at all, that's where a freight forwarder is really going to be able to separate themselves. And I think also on the customer service side, we really like customers that like that high touch model where they want to be contacted. They want to know what's going on with their freight. It's not the simple Dallas to Houston kind of scenario that we're talking about. And they need that information. And so if we have the right customer service people and the right lines of communication, they're also going to feel better about what they do. A lot of the larger freight forwarders have gone to online booking with their freight, even on ocean. So they want you to go in as a customer, select my product is coming out of Shanghai, it's coming into Dallas. They want you to go in as the customer, right? Go in, select the port, select the carrier, select the routing, select the delivery, and then you hit enter, and then the shipment gets booked. How many customers do you think really want to route their own freight, right? They don't. But I think that's a scenario too, where when it's simple, you can do those things. But when it's not, that's where a freight forwarder is going to be able to offer the expertise to be able to help you understand the best solutions, the market conditions, what's driving that, and how do we improve that. Today, Port of Shanghai is closed because of COVID. So if you're only moving stuff out of Shanghai, you're stuck. As a freight forwarder, we would tell you, we'll set up a truck, it will run that truck from Shanghai to Ningbo, and then we'll get on a vessel from Ningbo to Los Angeles, for example. Even during when the West Coast situation was happening, all those vessels were getting stuck. What we did, and everybody who would get stuck, they'd get stuck in that same situation. We went to our customer and said, okay, how much time do you need? When do you need it? And what's the price point? So once we knew that, then we could say, okay, how can we route it differently? So what we then started to do was run ocean freight from China down into Manzanillo, Mexico, and we would put it in through Mexico and then run it up, through the border of Texas and then deliver to the customer. You wouldn't normally think of that because that's not a normal route, right? That's where you have to be creative and find solutions.
One of the ways you can evaluate a forwarder very easily is just talk to some of their customers. And here at Pegasus, we pride ourselves on being open and honest and transparent about the amazing services we offer and touching those relationships with our clients that can actually paint that picture and tell that story of what we do for them and how we've been successful doing it. So instant referenceability is huge because many forwarders, transportation providers, and others are usually reluctant to provide that information because they're not confident in their ability to execute from a service perspective. Two, from a partner standpoint, there's a variety of things you could do. One is gain a better understanding of how you evaluate your partners, what kind of criteria you use to enforce compliance to your internal processes as well as the customers. When and if there's an incident or a critical incident that could impact failure, service, or anything, what do you do to hold those partners accountable? Other things like how do you reward those partners, right? Highly engaged organizations take care of all their stakeholders, and if you have that relationship with that partner that's strong, and you're typically going to lead to a more loyal service environment.